When travelers plan trips to the theme parks of Central Florida, they usually think of giant animatronic mice, looping roller coasters, and world-class hotels. Young women who vanished without a trace would be the last thing to ever cross their minds. But people go missing in Florida every day, and it is terrifying to think that the sounds of children's laughter is replaced by screams outside those theme park gates. 3 women, Michelle Parker, Melissa Sloane, and Jennifer Kess, all disappeared around the Orlando theme park area. Besides very few eerie clues like grainy video footage and some detectives' hunches, there isn't any evidence to be found in any of these missing persons cases. Although these 3 women are unlikely to ever meet, they will always be connected by last being seen near the happiest place on Earth. Melissa Sloane was born on Independence Day 1970 as Melissa Brady. Originally from Kentucky, Melissa and her husband John Sloane moved to Orlando, Florida sometime in 1993. The newlywed couple settled in Kirkman Road. John had plans to attend a motorcycle mechanics school in Orlando, which was why they had moved to Florida. Before moving, Melissa attended Bardstown High School and Spencerian College in Kentucky. Spencerian College, since renamed Sullivan University College of Nursing, was where Melissa became a licensed nurse. After graduating with a nursing degree, Melissa began working at the Tri-County Hospital near Louisville. It was there that she would meet her future husband. John Sloane was working at the same hospital as Melissa, not in the medical field, but as a night security guard. He had just been discharged from the Army Special Forces. The couple fell for each other fast and hard and were married within months, much to the dismay of Melissa's family, some of whom were suspicious of John and their whirlwind romance. The Brady family was very tight-knit, especially after Melissa's father was murdered in 1991. On October 6th of that year, Frank Brady was on his way to cash a check at a local convenience store when 2 escaped criminals carjacked him. Michael Sinclair and Dennis Reese were accused murderers awaiting trial in an Oklahoma prison. Reese was charged with beating and strangling someone to death, while Sinclair was accused of the double murder of his uncle and the hitman he had hired to kill him. Both men were bad news, and when they met in prison in 1991, a perfect storm started to brew. The 2 criminals escaped Bryant County Jail on September 19, 1991. They had plans to flee to Texas, but made a few pit stops along the way. 3 weeks later, in Elizabeth, Kentucky, police chased down a pickup truck being driven by Reese. Sinclair, who was in the passenger seat, began to shoot at the officer, who luckily survived. The truck was later found abandoned and was traced back to Melissa's father, Frank Brady, who was from Kentucky and 55 years old at the time. Days later, Frank was found handcuffed and shot execution style in the back of the head. Months after Frank's murder, Sinclair and Reese were captured. Reese was sentenced to life, and Sinclair was sentenced to death for the murder of Frank Brady. The Brady family was, obviously, no stranger to tragedy, and Melissa's mom had a bad feeling when in 1994, on the day of the Kentucky Derby, a big deal where Melissa is from, she couldn't reach her daughter. After 2 days of listening to Melissa's phone ringing and ringing, Melissa's mom Merle finally spoke to her son-in-law. On May 7th, John informed Merle that Melissa would call her when she was ready. The ominous feeling in Merle's stomach grew as she remembered the tragic death of her husband. she immediately filed a missing persons report with the Bardstown, Kentucky Police Department, which contacted investigators in Orlando. Just as the Brady family was no stranger to tragedy, the Orlando Police Department was no stranger to John and Melissa Sloane. In fact, authorities had been called to the couple's apartment on South Kirkland Road twice in the 9 months before Melissa's disappearance. John was described by Melissa's family and friends as controlling and abusive. The second time police officers responded to a 911 call from Melissa, they arrested John for assault. After the arrest, Melissa packed her belongings and returned home to Kentucky. Unfortunately, trying to leave an abusive partner can be easier said than done, and soon Melissa moved back to Florida to be with John. Family was important to Melissa, and she wanted to try and make her marriage work. Their reconciliation would only last until May 1st, 1994, which was the last time anyone heard from Melissa. Orlando detectives arrived at the Sloane's apartment and found John alone. He informed the detectives that his wife had left him for another man. He had no idea where she went or who the mystery man was, but he did allow police to search the apartment. What police discovered during the search was chilling. It looked as if John lived there alone. There was no sign that anyone, let alone his wife, had ever lived there with him. Everything Melissa owned was gone: her shoes, clothes, and toiletries. Her only belongings left behind were a bathrobe and her beloved pet cat. Melissa's loved ones described her cat as her baby and suggested that the fact the cat was still there and she wasn't was a red flag. She would never have left her cat willingly. Another ominous clue found in the apartment was a rifle propped against a wall in an unfinished bedroom. Markings that resembled blood spatter were also found on the walls. The apartment complex was surrounded by woods, and detectives scoured the area on 3 separate occasions, but the searches were fruitless. Investigators used cadaver dogs to search the property, but nothing was found. As of 2009, detectives said nearly 75% of the property had been explored. Before Melissa disappeared, she confided in some friends that she was ready to leave John and his abusive ways for good. She was due to testify against him in a few weeks in the assault case for which he was arrested. Besides John, the last person to have seen Melissa was her friend and colleague who worked as a paramedic at Orlando Regional Hospital, where Melissa was employed. After work, they attended a street festival, and Melissa didn't return home until 2:30 a.m. The next afternoon, she was seen on security footage at an ATM, from which she withdrew $20. That was the last sighting of Melissa. John was uncooperative with investigators from the start. After telling them Melissa ran off with another man, he refused to answer any more questions. Months after she disappeared, John was granted a divorce and eventually remarried. Perhaps suspiciously, his second wife would later be found dead outside an Orlando motel of what the coroner stated was an overdose. John now lives in Bellingham, Washington, about as far away from Orlando as possible. He is married to his third wife, with whom he has children. According to authorities, his third wife is aware of Melissa's disappearance and hopes one day she will feel safe enough to contact the authorities and let them know she is okay. In 2008, homicide detectives tracked John down in Bellingham and attempted to ask him questions about Melissa's disappearance. He slammed the door in their faces. Since she went missing, none of Melissa's credit cards have been used. Her social security number, nursing license, and driver's license have not been used either. At the time of her disappearance, Melissa was 5'4" and weighed about 130 pounds. She had blonde hair and eyes that changed from blue to brown depending on the light. Foul play is suspected in Melissa's disappearance. Orlando is home to many hotels, theme parks, and shopping districts, and is an excellent place for young people looking to start a life together, which is why it attracted John and Melissa Sloane. Jennifer Kess was another beautiful young woman who was excited to start her adult life after graduating college in Orlando. Orlando's large hospitality industry is what attracted Jennifer to the area. She didn't have to move far to begin her dream career, as she grew up in Tampa, which is just an hour-and-a-half's drive away. After graduating from Vivian Gaither High School, Jennifer enrolled at the University of Central Florida in Orlando. She graduated in 2003 with a degree in financing. Jennifer's parents, Drew and Joyce Kess, described Jennifer as someone who could light up any room she walked into. Logan, Jennifer's younger brother, was her best friend. Before Drew and Joyce got married, they lived in New Jersey and were once held up at gunpoint. Because of this terrifying incident, both Jennifer and Logan were taught from a young age that personal safety was of the utmost importance. Consequently, Jennifer maintained regular contact with her family in Tampa. In fact, she would check in with her friends and family daily, sometimes multiple times a day, and she would always answer her phone when her parents called her, or would phone them back soon after so as not to worry them. After turning down several offers for unsuitable jobs, Jennifer finally accepted a position with a timeshare company in Ocoee, Florida. She performed so well that she was promoted twice within her first year, and as a result, although most 24-year-olds would not be able to afford to purchase their own condo in an up-and-coming area in a popular tourist destination, Jennifer could, as she wasn't your average 24-year-old. Although Jennifer's new condo was located in a rougher part of Orlando, the area was slowly revitalizing, thanks to the addition of a new high-end shopping mall nearby. Her condo complex was called Mosaic at Millenia and was still under construction when she moved in. Because of this, it wasn't uncommon for contractors and construction teams to be seen working throughout the complex. Sometimes the contractors would have to do work in Jennifer's condo, which made her somewhat nervous. But ever cautious, Jennifer was always careful, such as whenever she walked from the parking lot to her condo after work, she made sure she was always on the phone with someone, just in case. This is why her friends and family were all so worried when they couldn't contact her in January of 2006. At the time of her disappearance, Jennifer was dating Rob Allen, whom she had met a year earlier at a bar in Orlando while Rob was in town. Rob lived in Fort Lauderdale, and despite living hours apart, they entered into a long-distance relationship. Jennifer and Rob had just returned from a romantic island vacation the day before her disappearance. She stayed the evening at Rob's house and drove straight to work in Orlando the next day. After leaving work, Jennifer followed her usual routine of calling her friends and family on her way home. She even spoke to her boyfriend Rob on the phone around 10 p.m. Rob later told authorities there was nothing off about the conversation. Jennifer had mentioned she was tired, but other than that, nothing was out of the ordinary. It is thought Jennifer left her condo complex around 7:30 a.m. for work. When she didn't arrive at work, her co-workers were immediately concerned. Rob tried calling Jennifer throughout the day, but his phone calls went unanswered or to voicemail. He wasn't worried though. Rob understood Jennifer was busy and assumed she was probably in a meeting. At 11 a.m., Jennifer's boss called her parents because he was so worried, as Jennifer hadn't called to say she wasn't coming in. Her parents' phone calls produced the same results as Rob's, and when they reached out to Logan, he said he hadn't heard from his sister either. Drew and Joyce Kess then called the local police stations and hospitals, but there was no sign of Jennifer. When they phoned the manager at Jennifer's condo complex, he reported that the apartment appeared fine and undisturbed, but that her vehicle was not in the parking lot. After hearing that, Jennifer's parents made the long trek to Orlando. When they arrived at Jennifer's condo, they confirmed that her apartment was undisturbed. Her suitcase sat in the living room, waiting to be unpacked from her recent trip with Rob. It appeared clear to them that Jennifer had got ready in her apartment for work that morning. There were damp towels in the bathroom, clothes on her bed, and makeup littering the counter. Her iPod, keys, and her Chevy Malibu were all gone though. Jennifer's parents contacted the Orlando police, who showed little concern at that time. Rob had informed the police that he and Jennifer had a minor spat the night before, and that was enough for the police to assume that Jennifer had run off. Due to the lack of interest from the Orlando Police Department, Jennifer's family and friends began handing out their own flyers. 48 hours after Jennifer disappeared, the police finally began investigating. When investigators questioned witnesses, Jennifer's neighbors said they saw her Chevy Malibu leaving the parking lot but driving erratically at approximately 7:40 a.m. the morning Jennifer went missing. As with most missing persons cases, Jennifer's loved ones, including Rob, were questioned by detectives, after which it was determined that neither Jennifer's family, nor Rob, nor an ex-boyfriend had anything to do with her disappearance. The construction workers at the Mosaic at Millennia complex soon became persons of interest. Some of the condos there were still empty at the time, and many of the workers were sleeping in them at night. Jennifer had frequently complained to her father that the workers often catcalled and whistled at her, which made her uncomfortable. The police had a difficult time questioning the construction workers, partly because many of them were illegal immigrants from Mexico, and they disappeared when they heard the police were starting an investigation. But there was a break in the case 2 days after Jennifer went missing. Her car was found at another apartment complex called Huntington on the Green. The police impounded and examined the vehicle. There appeared to be no signs of a struggle, and robbery was quickly ruled out as a motive, as a DVD player and other valuables were still in the car. A fingerprint belonging to Jennifer was found, but there was little else in terms of forensic evidence. Police dogs tracked Jennifer's scent back to her condo at Mosaic at Millennia. Police caught a lucky break when they found that the Huntington on the Green apartment complex had security cameras, and detectives were able to get footage from 2 cameras. The first showed someone driving Jennifer's Chevy Malibu into the complex at approximately noon on the day she disappeared. For about 30 seconds, the driver sits in the vehicle before exiting, but because the footage was grainy and a gate partly obscured the view, the person could not be identified. The Orlando police brought in the FBI for help analyzing the footage. The FBI determined the person was between 5'3" and 5'5" in height and wore overalls like a painter or a construction worker. The gender of the suspect has never been identified. The weekend after Jennifer's car was found, search crews comprising over 1,400 people covered the surrounding area for any sign of Jennifer, to no avail. Numerous rewards have been offered for information, but they have all gone unclaimed. Jennifer's cell phone records provided no clue as to her whereabouts, and there has been no activity on any of her credit or bank cards. Drew and Joyce Kess had the smart idea to place Jennifer's photo and description on decks of playing cards that would be distributed to jails in the area. David Byron Russ, an inmate at the Seminole County Jail, contacted Drew Kess to say he had information about Jennifer's disappearance. David was in prison for the murder of Madeline Lehnan, a 58-year-old woman. Orlando police refused to meet with David, so Drew went to see him, but the information David provided never amounted to anything. It is believed that David was not telling the truth and had no genuine knowledge about Jennifer's disappearance. Jennifer's parents held on to her car for as long as they could, but since it was leased, they had to return it eventually. The whereabouts of the vehicle is now unknown. Drew, Joyce, and Logan Kess feel let down by the Orlando Police Department. They have asked for years for them to classify Jennifer's case as cold, as more resources are available for cold cases, but they refused. In 2018, Jennifer's parents sued the Orlando Police Department for their daughter's case records. Drew and Joyce were successful and ended up with over 16,000 pages of documents and hours of audio and video recordings. A private investigator was hired who went back to the mosaic at Millennia Complex to interview Jennifer's former neighbors. Many female residents told the investigator how uncomfortable they felt during that time. The presence of the construction workers gave them an uneasy feeling. Drew and Joyce Kess have a GoFundMe page to help pay for the investigation into Jennifer's disappearance, and they are vocal advocates for the families of missing persons. They have worked hard to keep their daughter's spirit and memory alive. The worst part for Jennifer's loved ones, and for everyone in the Central Florida area, is that no one knows what happened to Jennifer, even after all these years. No one knows if she is dead or alive. Was Jennifer murdered the day she disappeared, or was she taken by human traffickers? Either would be horrific, but Jennifer's family deserves an answer, no matter how grim it may be. In 2016, Jennifer was declared legally dead. If she was alive today, she would be 40 years old. Jennifer was about 5'9" when she disappeared, with mid-length blonde hair and green eyes, although in some light they appeared blue. The Kess family has a tip line. They ask that anyone with information regarding Jennifer's disappearance call 941-201-4009. Consider visiting the Kess's GoFundMe page if you want to help with their investigation efforts. Michelle Parker's story is slightly different from Jennifer's and Melissa's. She didn't relocate to Florida hoping for a fresh start or a new life. She was a single mother of 3, working 2 jobs to support her children. In 2011, Michelle was a bartender at The Barn in Sanford, Florida, and she had started her own airbrush tanning business. Her son was 11 years old, and she also had 3-year-old twins. Dale Smith was the father of the twins, while Michelle's oldest son was from a previous relationship. Michelle and Dale met in 2006 at a popular Orlando hotspot, Cowboys, on South Orange Blossom Trail. When Michelle disappeared, she was no longer in a relationship with Dale. In fact, on the day she went missing, they had appeared on an episode of The People's Court. Michelle and Dale had been feuding because, allegedly, while the pair were engaged, Michelle threw her $5,000 engagement ring off a balcony while drunk. The judge ruled in Dale's favor and ordered Michelle to pay for half the cost of the ring. Before her ruling, though, Michelle let the judge know some facts about her and Dale's prior relationship. She told the judge that Dale had slept with 7 women during their relationship. It was also revealed that he was a violent and mean man, especially when alcohol was involved. During one fight in 2009, Dale punched a window in Michelle's car while holding their toddler daughter. Michelle asked for a restraining order after the incident, but it was denied. In the 1990s, Dale was involved in a brutal bar fight in which a man died. While in the Marine Corps, Dale sent his ex-wife Shannon Smith to the hospital with head injuries. He was ultimately dishonorably discharged for this. Like John Sloane, his second wife also died from a drug overdose. The People's Court episode featuring Michelle and Dale aired at 2 p.m. on November 17, 2011. Earlier in the day, Michelle met Nathan Mitchell, her boyfriend of about 1 month, for breakfast. She spent the afternoon at her mother's salon avoiding the television. Michelle's mom said her daughter referred to the show as humiliating. At 3:18 p.m., Michelle's black Hummer was videoed driving into Dale's apartment complex, as per their custody agreement. The way the camera was positioned, it did not catch Michelle's vehicle leaving the complex. At about 3:30 that afternoon, Michelle's 11-year-old son arrived home to an empty apartment. When his mother had still not come home a while later, he called his grandmother, Michelle's mom. 1 hour passed and still Michelle did not return home. Growing slightly concerned, her brother sent her a text message asking her where she was. A single-word text message came back from Michelle's phone. It read, Waterford. Some people assume Waterford refers to the Waterford Lakes area. Michelle was known for her long, bubbly texts, so the Parker family's concern became greater. At 7:20 p.m., Michelle's sister reported her missing, although everyone hoped she would still turn up her job at the barn that evening. Her phone shut off, either manually or because the battery died, at 8 p.m., the time her bartending shift was supposed to start. She never showed. Police took immediate action and served Dale Smith with a search warrant the following day. Michelle's black Hummer was found the next day parked near the mall at Millenia, which had been brand new back in 2006 when Jennifer Kess first moved to Orlando with dreams of success. Another eerie similarity to Jennifer's disappearance is both of these cases feature creepy surveillance videos. Police combed through traffic camera footage near the mall at Millenia looking for Michelle's Hummer, which would be easily recognizable not just for its size and color, but because Michelle's business name was stenciled on the back. 2 years later, in 2013, police finally released the chilling footage they found. At around 8:55 p.m. on November 17, a black Hummer SUV stopped at a red traffic light. The light was approximately 1 mile from where Michelle's car would later be found. The Hummer was clearly Michelle's, as it was clear that the stencils advertising Michelle's name and business had been scraped off. Just hours earlier, when she was last heard from, those stencils were on the vehicle. Dale claimed Michelle left his house at 4 p.m. after dropping their children off. He told authorities that by 4:30, he and the twins had gone to his parents' house. Initially, Michelle's family supported Dale, but after police named him as their prime suspect, their opinion of him began to change, especially when he refused a polygraph. Nate, Michelle's new boyfriend, was cleared of suspicion. Police pulled Michelle's phone records and saw that when the text saying Waterford was sent, she was nowhere near there. Her phone was near Lake Conway, a lake with a bridge Dale would need to cross to get to his parents' house. A dive team searched Lake Conway in December of 2011, and on December 7th, her iPhone in its pink cover was found. Michelle's case stayed cold for years, until 2014, when her family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Dale. Dale pleaded the fifth to over 100 questions during the civil case. As of 2018, the lawsuit has been delayed. Dale was granted custody of the twins and moved to Tennessee, cutting his children off from Michelle's family. Michelle's 11-year-old son moved from Florida to live with his biological father. Today, Michelle's twins are 14 and her older son is 22. Despite their suspicions, just like with Melissa Sloane, Orlando police are unable to make an arrest. Melissa, Jennifer, and Michelle. 3 beautiful women, each described as having a heart of gold and a smile that could light up a room. Sounds like they could have all taken up residence as princesses in a local Orlando magic castle. Their daily lives may have been different, with one a nurse, one a businesswoman, and one a busy mom. But unfortunately, tragic circumstances will connect them forever. In a place where dreams are supposed to come true, nightmares are also just around the corner.